Unfolded Mysteries. David had always been a workaholic, and when his job sent him on a last-minute business trip, he was determined to make the most of it. The quaint coastal town of Marigold Cove, known for its serene beaches and picturesque landscapes, seemed like the perfect place for some respite. He booked an Airbnb, a cozy cottage nestled among the ponds, hoping for a peaceful and productive stay. As he arrived at the cottage, the salt-laden breeze filled the air, and the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the coastal landscape. The cottage itself was idyllic, its white walls and blue shutters blending seamlessly with the picturesque surroundings. However, as he entered, an unshakable sense of unease settled in his chest. The cottage was quaint but dimly lit, and the decor was a curious mix of vintage and modern. The paintings on the walls depicted forlorn faces, and the furniture seemed to carry a heavy history. David couldn't help but notice the pervasive smell of salt water and an eerie hush that clung to the rooms. As night fell, he decided to settle in. He turned on the television, but the channels were filled with static, and the sound was distorted, making it unwatchable. Frustrated, he switched it off and attempted to use his laptop, only to find that the Wi-Fi signal was weak and intermittent, making work nearly impossible. Resigned to the situation, David decided to get some rest. He climbed into the antique four-poster bed, but the mattress was lumpy and uncomfortable. As he closed his eyes, the night seemed to grow even darker, the silence oppressive and absolute. Then he heard it. A soft, mournful humming that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. Startled, he sat up, his heart pounding. The sound grew louder, a haunting melody that echoed through the cottage, but the source remained elusive. David reached for his phone to call the Airbnb host, but it had no signal. He felt trapped, and as the humming continued, it began to take on a spectral quality, as if it was being sung by an ethereal presence. Fear gnawed at him, and he left the bedroom, determined to find the source of the eerie humming. The sound led him to a small, dusty attic door at the end of a narrow hallway. Hesitantly, he pushed it open and climbed the rickety stairs into the dimly lit space. In the attic, he discovered an old gramophone, its horn crackling with static. A record spun on the turntable, playing a mournful melody from another era. But what chilled him to the bone was the ghostly figure seated before the gramophone, her back to him, her long, disheveled hair obscuring her face. As David approached, the figure turned slowly, her eyes empty and filled with sorrow. She extended a bony hand toward him, her fingers clawed and skeletal. In a voice that seemed to come from the depths of the afterlife, she whispered, "Help me." Terror gripped David as he stumbled back down the attic stairs, fleeing from the apparition. He could feel her presence following him, her cold breath on his neck. He made his way to the front door, only to find it locked and unyielding. Panic surged through him as he desperately tried to escape the haunted cottage. Hours passed, but the cottage seemed to have become a prison, its rooms shifting and distorting like a malevolent maze. David's phone remained lifeless, the Wi-Fi signal non-existent, and the spectral humming continued to echo through the air, growing louder and more oppressive. As dawn broke, David was found by a neighbor who had heard his frantic screams. The police arrived and helped him leave the cottage, but the ghostly figure remained, her mournful presence lingering in the coastal air. In the days that followed, David's story of the malevolent rental in Marigold Cove spread through the town. The cottage was shunned by the locals, considered cursed and uninhabitable. David, forever scarred by his ordeal, could never shake the memory of the haunting presence that had turned his business trip into a nightmarish encounter with the supernatural. In the small, isolated town of Blackthorn, nestled deep within the thick forests of the Pacific Northwest, there stood an abandoned church that had long been the subject of whispered tales and chilling legends. St. Agnes's Chapel, they called it, a crumbling relic from a bygone era shrouded in an aura of dread and foreboding. Local legend had it that the church had been cursed since its inception, built upon a cursed burial ground by a deranged pastor. The stories spoke of unsettling occurrences, strange apparitions, unexplainable sounds, and those who dared enter never returned the same. The chapel was a place where time itself seemed to stand still, and its dark history weighed heavily upon the land. One moonless night, as a thick fog descended upon Blackthorn, a group of adventurous teenagers decided to investigate the eerie tales that had plagued their childhood. There was Emily, the determined leader of the group, Mark, the skeptical yet curious one, Lisa, the timid but always up for a challenge, and Daniel, the reckless thrill-seeker. Armed with flashlights and their shared bravado, they ventured into the dense woods, guided only by the faint glimmer of the abandoned chapel's steeple through the mist. As they approached, a heavy silence enveloped them, and the feeling of being watched grew increasingly oppressive. The church itself appeared even more menacing up close. Its once stalwart stone walls were now covered in moss and vines, and the windows were shattered, leaving only empty black voids in their wake. The group hesitated but pressed on, driven by their curiosity and desire to debunk the ominous tales. The moment they stepped through the shattered doorway, a frigid wind blew through the chapel, extinguishing their flashlights. Panic set in as darkness surrounded them, and the unsettling sound of whispering voices filled the air. A flickering, pale light suddenly appeared at the far end of the chapel, casting eerie shadows upon the walls. As they approached the source of the light, they stumbled upon a decaying altar adorned with grotesque symbols. Their terror escalated when they realized the light came from an old, blood-red candle that inexplicably burned with an unearthly flame. Before their eyes, ghostly figures began to materialize, staring at them with hollow eyes filled with unspeakable anguish. Emily screamed, her terror echoing through the chapel, while Mark urged them to leave immediately. The others, paralyzed by fear, hesitated as the ghostly figures advanced, their footsteps echoing like the tolling of a death knell. Desperation finally fueled their flight from the chapel, but as they rushed out, a malevolent laughter pursued them, a sinister mocking sound that seemed to emanate from all directions. Once back in the forest, they paused to catch their breath, their hearts still pounding in their chests. The realization that they had unwittingly set free the restless spirits of St. Agnes's chapel gnawed at their souls. They knew that they had crossed a threshold from which there was no return. From that night forward, the town of Blackthorn whispered new tales about the church, stories of the cursed souls who roamed the forest, exacting their revenge on any who dared to enter. The legend of St. Agnes's chapel became even more chilling, a reminder to all who heard it that some places are best left abandoned, their secrets buried forever in the dark recesses of the past. We hope you enjoyed those spine-tingling tales as much as we did. If you're still feeling a little spooked, don't worry, you're not alone. But before we say goodbye, we have a few things to ask of you. Don't forget to hit that thumbs up button if you found these stories as chilling as we did. It really helps our channel. Subscribe and turn on notifications if you haven't already. There are plenty more eerie adventures waiting for you right here, so you don't want to miss out. Share this video with your friends and fellow thrill seekers. After all, spooky stories are best enjoyed with company, right? That's a wrap for today, but stay tuned for more bone-chilling content in the future. Until next time, remember to keep your flashlight handy, your wits about you, and always be ready for the unexpected. Thanks for joining us on this haunting journey. Take care and may your nights be eerily entertaining. See you in the next video.